everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to finally get around to doing my July wrap-up. The first one that I finished right at the beginning of the month, and I have written a review for this, so I will link that below, is A Scurry of Squirrels, Nurturing the Wild by Polly Puller. I got this, I requested this from the publisher, which is Berlin Books. So this book is about squirrels, but it's a lot more than just squirrels. So the author owns a big piece of land that she has basically been rewilding. You sort of see that process from when she first got the land and the journey of the land itself and how it's been flourishing. She is also personally very involved in wildlife rescue and wildlife protection, and so a lot of the book is about her own experience in being very involved in nature work. And a lot of the animals that she has been helping out is squirrels. So that is sort of the way that the squirrels become the star of the book, even though there's a lot more going on. There's talk about nature protection and wildlife protection, and in a kind of a very practical way that I think is not as common in nature writing, which at least not from the ones that I've read. A lot of them are more about the observation aspect. Gave me something new from all of the nature writing I've been reading, but it was also really interesting in terms of the actual squirrel bits, where she talks about some of the behavior that she's been observing through her very close proximity to them. She talks about the problems that comes with introducing new species into an area and sort of the repercussions of that. So she's talking specifically in terms of the squirrel things, with the problems of gray squirrels taking over red squirrels areas. I feel like I really enjoyed the sort of hands-on approach that this book had, and gave more weight to some of the criticism I've seen in contemporary nature writing. This was more like she shared some of her own learned experiences, which I really appreciated. So as I said, I have written a review for this. I will link that below. Really enjoyed it. And also I will say that I haven't seen a squirrel this entire year, or I can't even remember if I saw one last year. But a week after having finished this one, I was on a walk and a squirrel passed me on the road. So I feel like that is a magical thing. Either way, I really enjoyed this. Would definitely recommend if it sounds of interest to you. Next, I read this book that I actually mentioned in the previous video I did for Swedish book recommendations. It is Norrtullsligan by Elin Wägner. It is a Swedish classic. It was published in 1908, and it's about a group of women who share an apartment, and they're all working women. They share the apartment for rent purposes, to be able to afford it, to live in the city, and they work various office jobs. Feels timeless, even though obviously it's been published more than 100 years ago. The way they talk to each other, the type of things that they discuss as well, like facing harassment in the office. They're pushed into corners, but they also want to stand their ground in being able to continue to work and provide for themselves. They are struggling with making enough money from jobs that they don't really enjoy, and don't really see any ways of earning more in the future. They earn much less than their male counterparts, and it's just the type of things that they discuss is still so recognizable. I really enjoyed this. The humor in this was so fantastic. So I really wish that someday it will get an English translation and other translations. I love this, and I will definitely be reading more Elin Wägner in the near future. The next one I have is Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I read this together with Mariana and Roxy. I will link both of their channels below. So this book is about a butler who has been working for the same house, this mansion type estate, and it's past generations and past owners, but he's been working in the same house for decades. I think it's set around the mid-50s in his contemporary times. He has planned a trip, his first vacation in many years, and he is going to meet a woman that he worked with. So the contemporary line of it is his vacation and him driving through the country. Most of the actual book is his reminiscing on past memories, very closely following this one character. Stevens is the butler's name, and his relationship with the master of the house and with the housekeeper, whose name is Miss Kenton. It was an interesting reading experience for me because I did not like Stevens for many reasons. Many of the things related to it is things we discussed in our buddy read. Very much formed by his time. He is in many ways influenced in his discrimination against others through his previous master, through his previous boss. Kind of like with the Downton Abbey vibe in the sense of upstairs and downstairs, and how the downstairs is shaped by the views and opinions of the upstairs. A lot of the conversations we had regarding the book was about, on the one hand, how Stevens is so stuck in his situation because his entire life is this house, is this work. His ambitions is only in regard to being the best butler he can be. He has no other ambitions for anything else. And he doesn't even consider it as an option. And so his life is very constricted within servitude. We had discussions about the lost opportunities of Stevens because, especially in regard to his relationship with Miss Kenton, the housekeeper. She's more outspoken, she's more free, or at least she seems more free than Stevens is, because Stevens is so compelled to keep everything, all of his emotions within him. It's part of his whole composure aspect of being a good butler, is to keep his private life and private thoughts outside of his work, and his work is his life. So whenever he is experiencing something of an emotion, he keeps it very locked inside him. And whereas Miss Kenton is more honest about her reactions to things, she is more emotional on the outside, and sometimes it seems like Stevens admires that and envies it, but his actual interaction with her on the page is very spiky. He criticizes her for her unprofessionalism. He often tries to put her in her place, and their interactions was one of my favorite things about this book, even though they're often uncomfortable but also so well done. So I think that was actually my favorite part of the book, the fact that Miss Kenton is such a different character, and their interactions is so, what they actually say and what they mean is so clearly two different things, and you can feel the duality of everything so clearly in their dialogues and their interactions. I will say that I think I enjoyed thinking about this book and talking about it with my fellow buddy readers more than I necessarily loved the book. So I did enjoy it, but I think the thoughts around it was more enjoyable for me. Next up we have Things I Don't Want to Know by Deborah Levy. This is the first book in her living autobiography series. So it's about her childhood, it's about her travels somewhat, it's about her coming into wanting to write, and sort of the power of words that she discovered quite early on, and what writing meant to her as a young person, and how she became a writer, why she writes. She talks a lot about femininity and gender expectations, gender roles, especially in regard to motherhood. One of the things that she talks about in terms of the femininity aspect and gender expectations is how there's no way to win against that kind of system, that kind of structure, because or that kind of construction, because even if you conform to the construction, there's always some way to criticize you. That is something that comes up in the second memoir as well. I felt very quickly connected to her voice as a writer in this book. I think a lot of my experience with this book was such an instinctive thing that I found it difficult to explain my thoughts and feelings about it. But I'll just give you an example of the kind of writing I liked in this. So this is a section in the end, towards the end. When love goes wrong, instead of seeing the front of things, we see the back of things. Our parents always walking away from each other, making a separate, lonely space, even when they sat together at the family tables. Like I said, she talks about the femininity thing, and this is an example of that. Mother, as imagined and politicized by the societal system, was a delusion. The world loved the delusion more than it loved the mother. So yeah, I love this, and I will talk more about her writing and why I loved it in my August wrap-up. Last up, I read, finally, Coventry by Rachel Cusk. This is an essay collection. It's divided in 3 parts, I think. My favorite essays were in the first part. They were the ones that I made an Instagram post about this and said that she often seems to be talking about very mundane things, and through those mundane things make interesting observations of a more general sense, more general weight. So for example, the first essay is about, she talks about driving, she talks about being an individual as a woman, she talks about motherhood in regard to that. Especially one of the things that comes up in this book that I really liked was how to be a mother and a writer. One chapter is called On Rudeness, which is also sort of a lot of the manners that is expected in a particular context, and what happens when someone goes against those unwritten rules. The second section is more mixed in terms of what it talks about, and it's harder for me to really pinpoint one theme other than art and sort of art history. There's one essay called How to Get There that is about MFA programs, which I also thought was really interesting, and sort of whether you can teach the craft of writing or not, trying to conceptualize what is good writing and trying to measure that, which is obviously something quite difficult with a lot of what goes into our reading is of course subjective. So the last section is literary criticism, so usually it's each essay is on a particular writer or a particular work. The ones I enjoyed most in the literary criticism section was the essay on Eat, Pray, Love, which I thought was really interesting, that talked about sort of the phenomena of the book and why it became so popular through looking at sort of the readership of it, the reception of the book, and in what context the book was created. I think it's especially talking about the privileged point of view that she's coming from, the author, as she's traveling to these various countries and taking pieces of that culture and putting it into that book. I think one of the things that she touches on in regard to that book is the performative aspect of it, which again I thought was really, really interesting. I haven't read Eat, Pray, Love, but I really enjoyed what she discussed around it. There were so many things that I liked about Rachel Cusk's point of view and her intelligent way of writing on various topics, but I definitely enjoyed the essays in the first section most of all in this. Those were all of the books that I finished in July. Let me know if you have read any of these books, and I would be really interested in hearing if you have any recommendations for authors in a similar vein to Deborah Levy or Rachel Cusk when it comes to nonfiction. Any nonfiction in a similar vein, I would be very appreciative if you have any tips. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.